Da dang. Extra chapters, 1. Liao Jixiang was wearing a new lotus pink robe with embroideries of water ripples that was tailored before the new year, hugging a pile of books as he appeared from the corner from the Department of Travels. He saw two people hiding behind a large willow tree not far ahead of him, and both of them were eunuchs, one standing and the other crouching. The person standing looked a lot like Mei Azha. He paused and peered towards them curiously. The eunuch crouching on the ground had an unfamiliar face. He was dressed in tattered clothes, his head tucked deeply in his arms and his body trembling. It looked like he was sobbing. "Chi Gur," he called out, softly approaching. The person crouching on the ground immediately wiped his face carelessly, stood up, and turned his face away. When Mei Azha turned around and saw Liao Jixiang, a smile unknowingly bloomed on his face. "Shouldn't you be in the Palace Academy? What are you doing here?" When the young eunuch who was secretly wiping tears heard the words Palace Academy, he immediately turned around in fear and bowed submissively. His movements revealed a bald spot around his temple, the skin red and swollen, as if his hair had been plucked out by someone. "Lao Zuzong asked me to deliver a message," Liao Jixiang said, his youthful, innocent eyes frequently darting towards that pitiful figure. Mei Azha noticed and explained, "This is an old acquaintance of mine, from the Office of Drums and Bells." Back then, Liao Jixiang was only around 15 or 16. He had just grown taller, and still retained a bit of baby fat on his cheeks. Looking worried, he asked in a childlike manner, "Why were you crying?" The person bowing next to them said nothing, for he was half ashamed and half frightened, and could only manage to shake his head. Very casually, Mei Azha said, "It's nothing much, just a bit of trouble. Then come and sit at my place for a while." Liao Jixiang handed his books to Mei Azha and carefully lifted the person's face. When the face was revealed, he saw a pair of arched eyebrows slender and slanting almost to the temples, a pair of thin lips so red as if painted with rouge. Those eyes were wet with tears, like a branch of delicate flowers that just suffered from frost, sorrowful yet gorgeous, almost enchanting. Liao Jixiang was momentarily stunned and then, not knowing what to do, he asked Mei Azha, what's his name?" "Zheng Erhua, a Dan roll singer from the Office of Drums and Bells." Don't cry, seeing that he was about the same age as himself, Liao Jixiang felt so very sympathetic as he took out some silver notes from his pockets, shoving them all into Zheng Erhua's hands. "Take this, buy yourself some sweet cakes." Zheng Erhua hurriedly pushed his hand away, and only then did he finally speak. "Don Wanip." He had a clear voice with a conspicuous country accent, "No use me." Mei Azha was trying to stop Liao Jixiang as well. "He doesn't live in the palace. He will return to the East Yamen after his chenying." Among the 24 yamens, the East Yamen was the lowest. Liao Jixiang couldn't help but look at him with pity. Probably feeling humiliated, the child walked away quickly as if he was fleeing from the scene, his figure limping, appearing to have hurt his legs. "Was he beaten?" Liao Jixiang asked with concern, yet Mei Azha avoided the question. "No, let's go." Liao Jixiang stamped his feet in frustration. After thinking for a moment, he said willfully, "Tell him to wait. I'll ask for a decree to bring him into the palace to accompany me." Mei Azha immediately frowned. After hesitating and stuttering for a moment, he finally squeezed out, "No." "But why?" As the young emperor's favored companion in school, Liao Jixiang was spoiled and domineering, unwilling to hear no from anyone. Mei Azha struggled to find proper words to explain, he was defiled, and became like that. Liao Jixiang looked at him blankly, unintentionally exuding a sharp, privileged ignorance. Indeed, as the emperor's favorite, as a paisui wearing the pheasant tail in the Qianqing palace, how could he have heard of such sordid matters outside? /Note, paisui is position among Ming dynasty eunuchs, with various roles such as the emperor's attendant. You know, Mei Azah leaned in and whispered something in his ear, which made Liao Jixiang's face turned red instantly. Nonsense, he looked disgusted and utterly horrified, shameless. So, if you want to stay with him, Mei Azah took his hand and led him back to the Directorate of Ceremonies, holding Liao Jixiang's books like a servant. Lao Zuzong would surely beat you until your buttocks are swollen. Liao Jixiang followed with his head lowered. Before long, he snapped abruptly, but he's suffering too much. With a flick of his sleeves, he made up his mind, all we need is a shift of our finger, and he'll have a new way to live. End chapter. Da-dang. Extra chapters, 2. Zheng Erhua, this strikingly pretty boy from a village, had never dared to dream that one day, he could enter the palace. Outside the palace, there were hundreds of thousands of poor eunuchs, suffering for life, yet he stood out from all of them. Dressing in newly tailored clothes, he stood among the fragrant lantern bearers, feeling exhilarated. Not far in front of him, he saw the emperor wearing a bright yellow brocade robe which was extensively embroidered with dragons, and on his side was Liao Jixiang, occasionally chatting and laughing with him. The scene of the two of them made Zheng Erhua unable to move his eyes away, as if he was merely one step away from the celestial beings residing high above the clouds, which he would soon squeeze into and become a part of. Then he too could taste the sweetness of wealth and power. Suddenly, Liao Jixiang turned his head around, smiling as his eyes met with Zheng Erhua's. Zheng Erhua thought his gaze must have been too intense, which startled Liao Jixiang, but it was in fact nothing but a fleeting glance. Liao Jixiang had turned back again, as if that was all just an unintentional glance to the back. The glance was something Zheng Erhua remembered for a lifetime. It was beautiful, pure, compassionate, and intelligent. He admired the Liao Jixiang standing at the pinnacle of power, he adored the Liao Jixiang whose beauty stood unmatched above them all. For the first time, he sensed a surge of strength rising in his humble heart, so powerful that it could almost push away the mountains and drown the seas, overwhelming him from head to toe. Vaguely, he recognized it as his own desire. Ban Ban, the emperor tugged Liao Jixiang's hand, shall we play hide and seek? Note, Ban Ban is an affectionate nickname that the emperor had given to Liao Jixiang. This was not a question but an emperor's decree. For this reason, Liao Jixiang didn't answer. Instead, he quickly untied his handkerchief and stood on tiptoe to blindfold the emperor. The young emperor loved playing the seeker, a fact well known to all the young eunuchs. As the young emperor leaned against the rock landscapes and counted down, Liao Jixiang led Zheng Erhua by his sleeve and guided him to the Jianqing Palace, where the stairs of the palace had a large hole underneath. They crawled into it one after another, sitting side by side and panting. A type of fragrance filled the air. Zheng Erhua couldn't tell what it was. It belonged not to the fragrant lanterns, for it was as refreshing and sweet as wintersweet, yet accompanied by a hint of bitterness. The smell of it immediately captured his heart. "Brother," he said, blushing, "you smell so good." Liao Jixiang giggled, dragging Zheng Erhua's hand into his sleeve. Inside was a slender, soft arm, which Zheng Erhua hesitated to touch or grasp, his eyes widening in the dark. "Your hand is so sweaty," Liao Jixiang complained, then leaned closer to his ear, his hot breath burning on Zheng Erhua's neck. "Can you feel it?" Zheng Erhua straightened his back, trembling as he felt for the things hidden in those sleeves. He could feel it, delicate and in small pieces, very fragile, like petals torn from a flower. Just then, they heard footsteps approaching, directly heading their way without the slightest turn of hesitation. Both of them held their breath, and stole a glimpse of bright yellow from the winding entrance. It was the emperor. He came in confidently, walking as he casually called out, like addressing a cat, "Yang Chun." Liao Jixiang and Zheng Erhua stayed still. The emperor sniffed the air suspiciously, "And someone else." Terrified, Zheng Erhua immediately stood up and pressed his young body against the stone wall, hugging his fragrant lantern and moving to the side. And so the emperor laughed, shifting towards Liao Jixiang. The two of them teased back and forth a little before disappearing into the depths of the cave. Zheng Erhua tried peeking inside, and saw only darkness and indistinct shapes. Soon, he heard their muffled voices. "Ah, there are so many people, and you only come to me. You always hide in this den, aren't you waiting for your emperor to find you? How do you always know it's me?" The emperor laughed, his tone different from moments ago, for it sounded deeper, almost affectionate. "The fragrance of various flowers are what thou lovest dearly, and oft wouldst thou pluck and place in thy sleeves, so I might always seek thee from afar." He paused, then continued even more boldly, "For thy fragrance hath captured me." And then there was silence. Probably driven by confusion or maybe out of curiosity, Zheng Erhua quietly crept even closer. Amidst the darkness, he saw many shadows, and it was hard to distinguish the men from the stone, although there was one pair of shadows that seemed to be facing each other and in an embrace, moving gently against the stone wall. End chapter. Dadang. Extra chapters, 3. After dinner, Liao Jixiang was in his undergarments as he lay on his stomach on the bed, his feet up in the air, reading a book titled Hongbao. Zheng Erhua entered his chamber carrying hot water. When he noticed Liao Jixiang's dirty feet, he offered, "Brother, let me wash your feet." Liao Jixiang didn't pay attention to him. He rubbed his feet together absent-mindedly. "There's no need." But Zheng Erhua had already prepared the water, and gently hugged Liao Jixiang's feet and lowered them into the basin, squatting down to wash them. Liao Jixiang was very used to being served. Having been the personal attendant of the emperor in school, he was never lacking servants. At this moment, he put down the book and examined the beautiful boy carefully. "You should go to the office of Pheasant's Tail and start as a guard with umbrella and fan, so that His Majesty will recognize you." Zheng Erhua looked up, smiling innocently. "Brother, I'll do whatever you tell me to do." Liao Jixiang suddenly pulled his feet out of the water and stepped onto the bed with his wet feet, tugging at Zheng Erhua's sleeve. "Come up, I want to show you something good." Again, he lay on his stomach on the bed, pulling Zheng Erhua beside him, and fished out a copy of Romance of the Western Chamber from under the pillow. The first leaf of the book bore the seal Guanjian's Haibao, suggesting that the book was printed by the court. Liao Jixiang flipped to a dog-eared page and pointed to the tiny, densely packed characters on it. "You must have sung the role of Yingying at the drum and bell office. How about you singing these lines for me?" Zheng Erhua stared at the characters, embarrassed and silent. Liao Jixiang turned to him curiously. "What, you don't know how to sing?" "Brother," Zheng Erhua's face was now steaming red, his pointy chin resting on the bed and sinking into the soft blankets, looking pitifully at Liao Jixiang. "I can't read." He was expecting Liao Jixiang to be angry, to look down on him, but as if suddenly enlightened on a confusing matter, Liao Jixiang only laughed brightly. "Well, I can teach you." He pointed to one of those black bugs on the page. "This character is." In fact, Zheng Erhua couldn't even hear anything, for his mind was enchanted in a daze and filled with Liao Jixiang's scent. He genuinely believed that this person was good, so good and perfectly good, just like a living bodhisattva. As his glance shifted sideways, he suddenly observed a small section of the white neck peeking out from the collar of Liao Jixiang's undergarments along with the smooth, round shoulder beside it. "Did you hear me?" Liao Jixiang circled Zheng Erhua's arm, his whole body leaning towards him. Half of his body was even pressing onto Zheng Erhua, nudging him lightly with his hips. Zheng Erhua wasn't an innocent anymore. Like Mei Azha said, he had been defiled, which had also tainted his heart. Driven by some dark, unspeakable impulse, he climbed onto Liao Jixiang's back, his tongue hotly licking the back of Liao Jixiang's clean, white ear. All Liao Jixiang felt was an involuntary shudder washing all over him. As he covered his ear in fear and looked back, he saw Zheng Erhua's beautiful, fairy-like face behind him, ever so gorgeous and staring at him intensely. "Brother," his voice was trembling so much that it was hard to make out his words, "I also want to be, like the emperor." Speaking, he leaned in to kiss Liao Jixiang on the lips. A brief touch and Liao Jixiang's face turned steaming red. Liao Jixiang's reaction suggested the obvious, that this was clearly his first time. Could it be that the shadows embracing in the den were not him and the emperor? Was I believing what I wanted to see because of my wicked own thoughts? Panicked, Zheng Erhua immediately wanted to apologize, yet all of a sudden, he was hit with a slap to the face. Liao Jixiang had slapped him, just like those wealthy, indolent lords and masters, just like his fierce, terrifying teachers, just like those men who would grab his buttocks and refuse to let go of him at night. Almost instantly, a surge of hatred abruptly swelled in Zheng Erhua's chest. He gritted his teeth in anger, but before he could really say or do anything, the door was opened from the outside, and an elderly man in his 50s entered. He was wearing an old dark blue yesa, and when he saw the two young boys tangled on the bed, he frowned deeply. Zheng Erhua was feeling somewhat ashamed but not exactly scared, which changed when the old man turned and casually instructed the men outside, "Drag him out and beat him to death." Zheng Erhua's bones were almost collapsing within him, he knew the order was for him. From the corner of his eyes, he saw Liao Jixiang scrambling off the bed, throwing himself at the old man and grabbing his sleeve. "Lao Zuzong, we were just playing." Zheng Erhua stared blankly at Liao Jixiang's white feet. He had only just washed them afresh, but now they were tarnished again. End chapter. Da-dang. Extra chapters, 4. The order to beat Zheng Erhua to death with thick wooden paddles was eventually not carried out due to Liao Jixiang's intervention. Now, Zheng Erhua was standing outside the heated east chamber of Qianqing Palace, a broom in his hands. He no longer had the right to carry fragrant lanterns and was relegated to menial tasks like fetching water and sweeping the garden. The malicious bullying from the East Yamen that was once far from him had also returned. He now had 2 scratches on his cheeks and cuts all over his hands. Cover it, don't let it get cold," from the window came Liao Jixiang's voice. He was waiting for the emperor to return from the west garden. Zheng Erhua looked at the long-handled broom in his hand, feeling extremely desolate. He was once so close to the pinnacle of glory, so close that everything was within reach. Yet now he had been slapped right back to his original state. He was unwilling to accept this fate. Naturally, anyone who had seen such splendor would be unwilling to relent. A yellow parasol was swaying and approaching from a distance. It was His Majesty, dressed in his short riding clothes, eagerly rushing over. He was about the same age as Zheng Erhua. Hiding next to the wall, he saw the emperor's energetic, young face, made even more handsome by his luxurious brocade attire. Adorning the center of his left eyebrow was a small red mole, and his nose was very pretty, straight like a sword. "Ban Ban," he called out warmly, leaping lightly up the stairs. The doors opened for him from both sides, and the parasol bearers uniformly lowered and retreated to the sides. Such was once Zheng Erhua's task. He watched as his eyes turning red with envy, clenching his fists. "I'm starving." The sounds from inside the window became more bustling. He heard the sound of messy footsteps, and then the young emperor exclaimed, "Only my Ban Ban always remembers his emperor. This isn't any common steamed cake, it's my great rescue." Liao Jixiang's melodious laughter reached Zheng Erhua's ears, ever so gentle, making him unsure whether he hated or loved him. Gathering his courage, he pushed the window slightly ajar to peek inside. All the unnecessary attendants had made their leave. With one hand, the emperor was eating the steamed cake, while his other hand was holding onto Liao Jixiang's waist, securing it in his hand and not letting him go. Zheng Erhua had touched that slender waist before. It was soft, lean, yet unbendable. Liao Jixiang looked a bit shy today. He removed a book from under his robes, flattened it and handed it to the emperor. "I've finished reading it. You can have it back." Zheng Erhua recognized the book. It was the copy of Romance of the Western Chamber from under his pillow. While eating the cake, the emperor glanced at him with a smile, like a brother or perhaps even like a lover. "Did you enjoy it?" Liao Jixiang blushed as he nodded. He hesitated for a moment and asked, "Do you have more books like this?" Zheng Erhua couldn't understand what was so interesting about an old book. Seeing the way they interacted, even if nothing had happened yet, it was only a matter of time. He could sense their innocent affections, slowly brewing, although none of them understood what it was. "If my Ban wants more, of course there are." The emperor wiped his hands on a silk cloth and spread his arms wide, beckoning Liao Jixiang like how one would call a child. "Come here, and your emperor will tell you." Liao Jixiang refused. "You're just teasing me again." "How can it be teasing?" The emperor stood up and walked over to him. "When we were younger, your emperor was happiest when you encountered a character you don't know." Seeing Liao Jixiang's puzzled look, the emperor wrapped his arms around his shoulders. "It was just a hug, without other intentions. Back when we were young, I didn't understand, but now that I think about it, the occasional times when we studied under flowers, were the fortunate times for me to lean on your fragrant shoulders." Liao Jixiang was initially a little reluctant, but upon hearing the emperor's words, he actually softened and gently rested his head on the emperor's shoulder. They were truly two innocent children, embracing each other and standing still in the chamber. Zheng Erhua vaguely recalled a line from an opera that he had once sung, a shy and bashful feeling, occasionally revealed at the eyebrows, which perfectly depicted Liao Jixiang's look in that moment, which was just like water, slowly simmering over a small fire. At that moment, as if enchanted, the emperor suddenly cried out, "Yang Chun, my Yingying! What are you doing?" Someone suddenly slapped Zheng Erhua from behind, which scared him so much that he immediately knelt down. His ear was pinched by a hand, dragging him aside while he was on all fours. All he saw were numerous pairs of black boots, and the pair in the middle had a red robe with colorful embroideries, undoubtedly belonging to a dadang. Zheng Erhua looked up, his mind filled with horror. Yet the man who caught him was the one startled. He asked, "What's your name?" "Zheng." "Zheng Erhua." "Oh, good." The voice belonged to a middle-aged eunuch, who had a deep scar on his forehead and a plump figure. When he smiled, he resembled a Buddha. "You are in luck. Get up, from now on, this one will take care of you." Why was he in luck? Zheng Erhua later learned that this man was named Ma Sanbi, the supervising eunuch of the Directorate of Ceremonies, who was also in charge of the Eastern Depot's matters. As for the scar on his forehead, it was said to be given by the emperor himself with an inkstone, due to Lao Zuzong's instigation. End chapter. Dadang. Extra chapters, 5. Zheng Erhua had his hair styled like a girl's and wore a long, pleated skirt. He was hiding behind a gold-embellished folding screen. Sitting on the throne was the young emperor with Ma Sanbi beside him, pouring cup after cup of wine for him. The emperor seemed rather unhappy as he leaned sideways on the dragon throne. Whenever Ma Sanbi encouraged him to drink, he said, "Without my ban, any wine is tasteless." Lao Zuzong took him to Daxing Long Temple to pray to the Buddha. "He'll be back in half a day." Ma Sanbi discreetly flicked his sleeve to reveal a red pill. "Your Majesty, let's watch a play, the most delightful romance of the Western Chamber." The gongs and drums began to play, and it was time for Zheng Erhua to debut. Yet, not knowing whether it was nervousness or unfamiliarity, Zheng Erhua felt his body was paralyzed. Ma Sanbi was so anxious that he continuously called out, Yingying, make your entrance, Yingying. At first, the emperor frowned. Probably out of his youthful temper, he shook his sleeves and stood up to leave. Just as Ma Sanbi was worried about what to do, Zheng Erhua, in his haste, knocked over the folding screen. Amidst a loud crash, fine dust rose and swirled under the sunlight, and there he was, a trembling, alluring, gorgeous Kui Yingying was revealed. The emperor stared at him in amazement, as if he was staring at a celestial being descended from above. Zheng Erhua was indeed beautiful, his peach-colored cheeks half concealed behind his sleeves, making the emperor feel that he needed pity and love. "Go ahead, your majesty," Ma Sanbi urged from the side, "there's your Yingying." The emperor's Yingying had always been Liao Jixiang, yet perhaps the sight of Zheng Erhua was so heavenly and gorgeous, that the emperor approached him. Zheng Erhua fell to his knees, pounding his forehead to the ground, crying out, "Your Majesty! This is a eunuch," the emperor realized. At this moment, Ma Sanbi stepped forward, holding the red pill in one hand and a cup of wine in the other. "Your Majesty, this one offers you an elixir." While it was called an elixir, it was really just red lead, but the young emperor didn't know that. He glanced at it in confusion, and just as he was about to wave it away, Ma Sanbi pressed on and whispered, "Take it, and your majesty will surely ascend to the clouds." Suddenly, the emperor felt a warmth at his fingertip. When he looked down, he saw Zheng Erhua taking his finger into his mouth. The emperor seemed to begin to grasp what Ma Sanbi meant by ascending to the clouds, and, half reluctantly and half willingly, he swallowed the pill with the wine. The moment he swallowed this pill, his thigh was secretly held in a pair of arms. It was Zheng Erhua, kneeling and slowly caressing him through his silk pants. As his hands slowly moved up, his touches grew more and more heated and indecent. When he suddenly grabbed the emperor's most sensitive part, he let out a startled moan. What happened next was a blur. The emperor wasn't sure how he ended up completely undressed and in bed. By the time his senses returned to him, he opened his eyes and saw a naked eunuch, his face painted with rouge, straddling him unlike any male or female. Yet his lower parts felt incredible, which was not like anything he had ever experienced. He could hear his own ragged breaths, uncontrollably letting out moans and groans. "Your Majesty, is this one good?" He didn't know what the false Yingying used to wrap him. It felt slick and warm, and as he moved up and down, he could see his own immature hardness, pounding frantically for a long time. Only then did he realize that he was penetrating into the eunuch's buttocks. Ah! The emperor couldn't bear it anymore. Overwhelmed by this intense pleasure, he let out more intoxicated moans, yet the words out of his mouth were, "Ban ban. Ban ban. Asterisk asterisk asterisk." When Liao Jixiang returned from Daxing Long Temple with the Lao Zuzong, he didn't return to his own quarter first. Instead, he escorted Lao Zuzong to his room. While Lao Zuzong was having tea, a junior eunuch came and invited Lao Zuzong outside. Liao Jixiang didn't think much of it. He volunteered to tidy the bedding and gather the loose manuscripts, until he faintly overheard someone outside mentioning, "Zheng Erhua and His Majesty in Yuxi Palace." Hearing the name made Liao Jixiang curious, but he didn't pay much attention until he heard, "Slept together." Softly. Lao Zuzong reprimanded in a whisper, for he was afraid that Liao Jixiang might hear, but he already had. Tiptoeing to the door, Liao Jixiang listened. Ma Sanbi, arranged it? Crack. It was the sound that came as Lao Zuzong gripped the teacup on the table. Liao Jixiang knew him well, that he was about to throw something when he was furious. Apprehensively, he waited for the loud shatter, but even after a while, the outside remained silent. Lao Zuzong held back because he didn't want to alarm him. "Go, check inside," the old man whispered. "Why is he so quiet?" Without time to shed tears, Liao Jixiang quickly climbed into bed, facing the wall and pretending to sleep in his clothes. Almost simultaneously, the door was pushed open by a crack. In a moment, the junior eunuch reported back, "Lao Zuzong, he's asleep." Lao Zuzong said nothing and the junior eunuch mumbled a few more words before making his leave. Lying there, Liao Jixiang's eyes remained wide open and waited for a long time, but Lao Zuzong never came in. Suddenly, he understood what was going on. How could Lao Zuzong believe that he was asleep? And how could he have fallen asleep for no reason? Lao Zuzong was simply sparing him the embarrassment. At that moment, tears broke free of his restraint and streamed down his face, which he wiped haphazardly away with his sleeves. Reflecting on his years in the palace, he had never cried before. It was as if the gods had paved his way to success. From the moment he entered the palace, he had been chosen by Lao Zuzong. Right after being chosen by Lao Zuzong, he was sent to Qianqing Palace as the emperor's personal companion. Who had ever mistreated him? No one, all thanks to Lao Zuzong. But now, he was hurt deep into his bones, because of the betrayal by his childhood companion, and because of the consequences caused by a moment of kindness. He should have confronted them, yet here he was, biting his lip, not even daring to make a sound as he cried. The sunset on that day was especially red. The sunlight from the west pierced through the mists and clouds, yielding a blinding golden color. Amid this splendor red gold, Liao Jixiang and Zheng Erhua met on the long steps in front of the Qianqing Palace. Liao Jixiang was ascending while Zheng Erhua was descending. The once poor boy had completely transformed. He was now wearing a newly tailored red robe with embroideries in golden threads. His hair was neatly combed and styled with fragrant oil, making his face appear flawless and fair like a piece of fine white jade. His eyes were brimming with affection, with the slender corner of his eye slanting slightly upwards. A single look from him was capable of stealing souls. Liao Jixiang lowered his head, wanting to pass by without words, yet Zheng Erhua insisted on calling out to him, "Brother." Liao Jixiang didn't respond. "I'm just an entertainer," Zheng Erhua admitted self-deprecatingly, "apart from this, I have no other way up." Liao Jixiang sneered. He was no longer Zheng Erhua. The emperor had given him the name Xian, meaning brilliant and lustrous like gold and stone. In one night, he had risen to fame from hundreds of water-fetching, floor-sweeping junior eunuchs. "I won't compete with you." Zheng Xian grabbed his sleeve, looking pitiful. "I'll be content as a guard with umbrella and fan in the office of Pheasant's Tail." "Didn't you originally want me to?" Liao Jixiang didn't let him finish before he forcefully brushed past him. Zheng Xian lifted his head and watched from the bottom of the stairs as the slender figure moved up the steps. That slim figure, that elegant figure, was something he would never be able to touch again. When Liao Jixiang entered the hall, he didn't find the emperor in his usual reading spot, so he turned and looked towards the bed. Just like he expected, he saw the emperor squinting his eyes and reclining there, with a junior eunuch on the side, fanning him. Seeing Liao Jixiang, the emperor sat up joyfully, impatiently tapping the edge of the bed. "Leave, leave." The junior eunuch bowed, walked around Liao Jixiang and exited. Not only did he leave the chamber but he also closed the door behind him. The room darkened, and the emperor immediately pulled Liao Jixiang's arms. "Ban Ban, your emperor missed you. Why is the light out?" Liao Jixiang discreetly brushed him away, wrapping his own sleeve around his wrist. Even the emperor's touch made him feel filthy. "What light?" The emperor forcefully pulled him from the back, dragging him into his arms. Taking advantage of their position, they rolled over and tumbled onto the bed. "Your emperor can't wait anymore." After he spoke, he smudged his lips against Liao Jixiang's face, and once his lips touched him, he began to pull at his clothes. Liao Jixiang was so embarrassed and furious that his face was flushed red. This childhood playmate who grew up together with him, this big brother who always called him Ying, had now committed such indecent acts behind his back, and now he even wanted to defile him as well. At the peak of his disgust, Liao Jixiang slapped the emperor hard. Pack! The sound of it was so loud that it slashed through the twilight. Covering his face, the emperor stared at him in disbelief. On the other side of the bed, Liao Jixiang held his collar tight, showing no trace of surrender. And precisely because of Liao Jixiang's defiance that the emperor began to feel ashamed. While he was curling his lips and trying to force a smile, the emperor heard Liao Jixiang coldly say, "Get out," and that was not enough, for he continued to call him, "filthy." Who in the world dared to slap the emperor? Who in the world dared to tell the emperor to get out? With the door closed and only the two of them present, the emperor could tolerate it, but the comment of filthy was simply too much. The emperor, in fact, was indeed feeling dirty himself. After doing such a thing with a mere entertainer, all he wanted was to do it with Liao Jixiang once as well, so that he could feel clean again. Who do you think you are? With his weakness being attacked, the emperor became furious. Knocking off Liao Jixiang's headdress, he grabbed his hair bun and dragged him off the bed. Riding on the tide of his anger, he dragged Liao Jixiang all the way to the threshold. Outside, many junior eunuchs had gathered. The emperor growled at them, "Throw him out of here immediately. Have him take nothing along. Let him suffer in Ningxia, in Gansu. Make him leave tonight." With a wave of his hand, Liao Jixiang tumbled down the steps. The emperor slammed the door violently close, covering his head in his arms as he hid behind the door. Though he was the sovereign, though he was supposed to be decisive and ruthless, he failed his position as he allowed his eyes to swell up red with tears and curled up in pain. Outside, many people came and went. No one knew how much time had passed when he suddenly shivered and opened the door. Outside the door, Lao Zuzong was kneeling there with an entourage of young ones, all pleading for Liao Jixiang. Perhaps out of defiance, or maybe it was his stubbornness, he immediately put up an attitude befit an emperor. "Is he gone?" "Gone." The elder master kowtowed heavily, "Liao Jixiang. It's good that he's gone." The emperor pretended to be overjoyed, the corner of his eyes and his eyebrows still lingering exaggerated pride and delight. "Send some capable men with him. Don't let anyone say that the emperor is ungrateful of our past." Judging by the emperor's words, Lao Zuzong knew that there was no hope for leniency. He stood up shakily, paused for a moment, and said, "As your majesty commands." When he turned to leave, the emperor hurriedly called him, but when Lao Zuzong stood there waiting, he actually didn't know what to say. On a sudden thought, he ran back inside, grabbing the calligraphy brush and hastily wrote down a note, "A pardon for thee, to save thee from death in the future, so that thou mayst know thy emperor's deepest regard." It was an informally forged iron token to prevent death, hastily written on a fragile piece of paper. He handed this thin piece of paper to Lao Zuzong, speaking with a mix of solemnity and an attempt to hide it, "Give it to him, and tell him to take care." Lao Zuzong's eyes were already cloudy, but the look he gave the emperor was so full of pity and sorrow, forcing this powerful child to act rashly once more. "Here's my decree: promote Zheng Xian, the guard with umbrella and fan in the office of Pheasant's Tail, to oversee the palace, make him an attendant with a sword, and reward him with a chamber by the royal study, a red robe with golden embroideries of fighting bull patterns." Such favor was way across the line, even outrageous and absurd. The young emperor patted Lao Zuzong's shoulder and continued, "Zhen took your Liao Jixiang, and here Zhen return you a Zheng Xian." He ordered, "Take him under your wing." Lao Zuzong's aged lips seemed to be trembling, yet not a word left from those lips. And so, the young emperor returned to his dragon bed in peace, but he laid wide awake at night for a very long time. At that time, he didn't know that the fragile note was torn into pieces as soon as it reached Liao Jixiang. Nor could he foresee that, 10 years later, when he had truly become a ruthless, decisive ruler, he would still cry ever so helplessly on that exact same bed, for an old acquaintance in Gansu had crippled his left leg to save his kingdom. End chapter.